At 1:30 a.m. on September 22, 2013, in the Galicia region of Spain, two men who had just finished drinking left a bar to drive to their next entertainment destination. Since their driver's licenses had recently been confiscated by police, the two men had no choice but to take a remote rural road to avoid checkpoints. It was late at night, with moonlight dimly illuminating the road. Although both were intoxicated, they tried to focus on driving through the silent night. Then, as the car passed through a densely forested area, the headlights suddenly caught a strange, dark shape lying by the roadside. A mix of curiosity and concern made them immediately stop the car and shine their flashlight toward it. As they approached, both froze in shock. On a gentle slope about 6.5 feet from the road's edge lay the body of an Asian girl, motionless, showing no signs of life. Police were notified and quickly arrived at the scene. The girl was wearing athletic clothes, with an outer jacket neatly folded and placed beneath her, as if someone had gently laid her down. There were no signs of struggle or dragging around the area, no blood or suspicious footprints, which immediately led police to realize this was not the primary crime scene. And the only unusual thing they found was several pieces of orange rope scattered nearby. It didn't take long for police to quickly identify the victim's identity. The girl's name was Asunta Bastera, only 12 years old, the only adopted daughter of a famous upper-class couple in the region. Ironically, just a few hours earlier, the girl's parents had gone to the police station to report their daughter missing. No one expected that the search would end in such a heartbreaking tragedy. The subsequent forensic examination revealed that Asunta had died from asphyxiation sometime between 6 and 8 p.m. that same day. Clear marks appeared on her body, showing she had been bound with rope. In addition, in Asunta's bodily fluid samples, specialists discovered high levels of lorazepam, a powerful sedative commonly used to treat anxiety and insomnia. At high doses, it can cause victims to fall into a state of stupor, lose control of their body, and if used long-term, the consequences can be extremely serious. The forensic examination results showed that the lorazepam concentration in Asunta's body was many times higher than the normal therapeutic level, enough to put a child into a deep coma. Combined with the cause of death being asphyxiation, police were almost certain that Asunta had been murdered, and the girl's death could not have been an accident. To find more clues, investigators visited a family living near where the body was discovered. This couple stated that between 11 p.m. and midnight that night, they had passed by that slope 3 times but hadn't seen the girl at all. This meant that Asunta's body had only been placed there for a short time before being discovered. However, because the two men who first reported to police both had criminal records, initially the investigative team couldn't rule out the possibility that they were the real perpetrators, deliberately staging the scene to mislead. Police conducted thorough interrogation and verification, but the results showed both had clear alibis, enough to eliminate them from suspicion. When the investigation was expanded, police discovered strange biological traces on Asunta's clothing. The samples were sent for DNA testing, and the results matched perfectly with a Colombian man who had a prior conviction in a similar case and had only recently been released from prison. Immediately, police launched a search and summoned this man for questioning. In a short time, they collected his entire travel itinerary, statements, and alibis. The results showed that at the time the crime occurred, the suspect was in Madrid, hundreds of miles from the scene, and had solid alibi evidence. Deeper forensic analysis also showed that the DNA traces on Asunta's clothing could have been contaminated during the sample preservation process, as they were processed in the same laboratory with evidence from other cases. When this hypothesis was confirmed, suspicions about the Colombian man were officially eliminated. From here, police began to shift their investigation, focusing on Asunta's movements and behavior in the final hours before she died. According to Asunta's parents' statements, everything began on the evening of September 21, 2013. Around 7 p.m., the mother, Rosario Porto, said she drove alone to the country villa in Teo to check on the house, leaving Asunta alone in the downtown apartment to do homework. The father, Alfonso Bastera, was at another apartment not far away, saying he spent the evening reading. Around 9:30 p.m., Rosario returned home. and the moment the door opened, she realized Asunta had disappeared. In a panic, Rosario immediately called everywhere, from neighbors to friends to her daughter's acquaintances, but everyone answered that no one had seen Asunta all evening. Therefore, the couple hurried to the police station to report their daughter missing. Before leaving the police station, the mother suddenly paused, as if remembering something important. Her voice trembling, she told investigators about a strange incident that had occurred 2 months earlier. That evening, she said, her husband had accidentally left the key in the door. In the middle of the night, he suddenly heard desperate screaming from Asunta's room. Sensing something wrong, he quickly got up and ran to his daughter's room, and before him was a horrifying scene. A man dressed in black, wearing gloves, standing right in the middle of the room, behaving extremely suspiciously. When discovered, the stranger pushed him down and ran through the hallway, disappearing into the night. They both believed it was just a failed burglary attempt, as nothing was missing from the house. They also chose to remain silent, not reporting to police, partly because they didn't want Asunta to be more frightened, partly because they thought it was just a minor incident. However, now that the girl had passed away under mysterious circumstances, the memory of that night returned like a dark omen, foreshadowing the tragedy about to befall this family. 2 days after the incident, Asunta's funeral was held in an atmosphere of mourning and heaviness. Relatives, friends, teachers, everyone bowed their heads silently, unable to believe that the intelligent, well-behaved girl had passed away. As the coffin was being lowered, a strange man approached Asunta's mother, Rosario Porto. He leaned close to her ear, whispered a few words very quietly, then both left the funeral in silence. After the incident occurred, police quickly noticed an important detail. The location where Asunta's body was found was only 2.5 miles from her mother Rosario Porto's country villa. The distance was too close to be a coincidence. Therefore, they requested permission to search this villa. Initially, Porto appeared reluctant, citing fatigue and stress, but faced with the investigators' persistence, she finally agreed to open the door. Before them was a 2-story villa spanning over 4,300 square feet, surrounded by high stone walls and heavy iron gates, with only one entrance and exit. Inside was equipped with a modern alarm system, with very high privacy and security. As soon as they entered, police signaled Porto not to touch anything. However, just a few minutes later, she suddenly said she wasn't feeling well and asked permission to go upstairs to use the bathroom. An observant officer immediately quietly followed, and that decision helped reveal a highly suspicious detail. Porto didn't go to the bathroom at all, but walked straight into the bedroom, bending down to hastily search through the trash can. When police approached, they saw it contained a face mask, several crumpled papers, and a piece of orange rope, the same type of rope found at the crime scene. However, because this type of rope was quite common, the laboratory couldn't determine exactly whether the two pieces matched. Seeing police following, Porto immediately appeared flustered. Her face became tense, her eyes darting around as if trying to hide something. Before police could speak, she hurriedly made excuses, saying she was just cleaning up the house. She pointed to the pile of crumpled paper in the trash, explaining that these were Asunta's old tissues from when she had a cold. Porto added that mother and daughter hadn't visited the villa in a long time, as they mainly lived in the downtown apartment, so this was probably just leftover trash from before. However, these explanations only increased police suspicions. Because while Porto insisted they hadn't been here in a long time, the entire villa was spotlessly clean, the floors and furnishings all shining and tidy to an unusual degree, completely unlike a place that had been left vacant for months. To reconstruct the family's movements on the day of the incident, police extracted all data from surveillance cameras along the route Porto claimed to have traveled. However, when compared with her initial statement, they quickly noticed a series of irregularities. According to the recorded footage, at 6:22 p.m. that day, a green car, Porto's car, passed through a roundabout near the Teo area. What was noteworthy was that the person sitting in the passenger seat was Asunta, completely contrary to Porto's statement that she had gone alone to the country villa. Not only that, but the time Porto returned to the city was also unusually long, much longer than the outbound journey, making investigators even more suspicious. Faced with irrefutable evidence, police decided to summon Porto for a second time. When the video footage was played, she remained silent for a long time, then finally admitted that the person sitting beside her was indeed Asunta. Porto explained that due to being too stressed when reporting the case, combined with taking sedatives for a long time, her memory had become hazy and confused. Porto then completely changed her statement. She said that day, mother and daughter went to the villa in Teo together, but Asunta said she still had homework to finish, so she drove her daughter back to the downtown apartment. On the way back, Porto conveniently stopped at a store to buy ballet equipment for her daughter, but discovered she had forgotten her wallet at the villa, so she went back to get it. After that, she continued to stop at a gas station, but didn't fill up because she forgot to bring her discount card, so the journey home was longer than usual. However, police remained skeptical about Porto's constantly changing statements. A witness living near the country villa in Teo provided important information. That evening, he heard sounds coming from inside the house, like objects falling or strong impacts. Around 8:53 p.m., he saw Porto drive away from the villa, but didn't see Asunta at all. According to forensic examination results, Asunta had already died by that time. This led police to conclude Porto didn't go shopping or get gas as she claimed, but was possibly looking for a place to dispose of her daughter's body. However, one point that troubled investigators was that Porto had a small physique and wouldn't have enough strength to lift the body of a 12-year-old girl out of the car and place her on the slope without leaving traces of dragging or struggle. Therefore, they formed a new hypothesis. In this case, she had an accomplice. Asunta's father, Bastera, naturally became a suspect. When the couple reported the case, police had noticed a detail. Bastera had quietly said that Asunta was certainly deceased, hoping she hadn't suffered otherwise. But at that time, police hadn't found Asunta yet, which had raised their suspicions. Later, police conducted a search of Porto's car. They found this car had also been carefully cleaned, very spotless, with the floor mat from the back seat missing. But they still found Porto's DNA on the driver's seat and Asunta's DNA in the liquid on the back seat mat. More importantly, they discovered Bastera's DNA on the lining in the trunk. Based on this, police deduced that both committed the crime together. In the car on the day of the incident were not only Porto and Asunta, but also Bastera. To avoid being recorded by surveillance cameras, he deliberately hid in the trunk. After identifying both as suspects, police first investigated their communication records. But on the day of the incident and the day before, all text message conversations between the two had been deleted and couldn't be recovered. Porto's call records for that day had also been completely erased. Police decided to conduct a comprehensive search of the apartment and country villa where they lived. They hoped to find clues from there. This search lasted 7 hours. Police discovered in the apartment a type of medication, appearing as white tablets, with active ingredients matching those found in Asunta's body. This medication originally belonged to Porto, used to treat her depression and anxiety. They also found in the country villa traces that Asunta had left recently. This was very likely the first crime scene. Having obtained this evidence, police quickly arrested Porto and Bastera, charging them with murder. Although Asunta was adopted, she had lived with them for 12 years, developing deep affection. Why would this couple kill the girl? This perhaps must be told from their secret life behind closed doors. Porto was born into one of the most prestigious and educated families in Santiago de Compostela. Her mother was a famous art history professor at the University of Santiago, and her father was a renowned lawyer who owned his own law firm and had served as the honorary French consul general locally. The family of 3 lived in a spacious house on a central commercial street where bustling modern life blended with the ancient charm of the old city. Growing up in that environment, Porto was surrounded by knowledge and expectations. From childhood, she was seen as the family's pride, the one who would inherit her parents' reputation and status. However, inside that obedient and perfect exterior, Porto always longed to do what she loved. She had dreamed of becoming a psychologist, but couldn't avoid following her father's path, which was studying law. From a young age, Porto was always an excellent student and had participated in a student exchange program in France for a year. As the only daughter in a powerful family, pampered by her parents, she grew up in the embrace of expectations. However, in France, a strange and cold place, Porto felt lost and lonely. That period caused her to begin showing symptoms of depression and anxiety, though she ultimately completed her studies smoothly. After graduation, Porto wanted to go to Madrid for graduate studies in economic law, but her parents firmly forced her to stay in her hometown. In the end, she had to give in. During that time, Porto fell in love with a man who worked in the railway industry, but that romance soon fell apart, because in her parents' eyes, the class difference made this relationship unable to have a good ending. In 1990, through friends' introduction, the young woman Rosario Porto, then only 21 years old, met Alfonso Bastera, 26 years old. Bastera was born in Bilbao, a well-known journalist who had worked for many major newspapers and television stations, considered educated and having certain influence in the media industry. From their initial conversations, the two quickly found harmony in personality and life ideals, then gradually developed feelings. 6 years later, they officially walked down the aisle together. Porto's parents were extremely satisfied. They not only supported this marriage, but also bought the young couple a luxurious penthouse in an upscale building near their home as a new nest. Not long after, at age 27, Porto inherited her father's career, a renowned lawyer, and became the honorary consul of the French consulate locally. However, fate was not kind to her. Porto suffered from lupus erythematosus, and doctors advised her not to get pregnant. At her parents' urging, the couple decided to go to China to adopt a child. In the eyes of the adoption agency, this couple met all ideal conditions. They were wealthy, highly educated, and both had positions in society. Normally, international adoption takes 2 to 3 years, but they only took just over a year, and in 2001, successfully adopted 9-month-old Asunta. Asunta's original name was Yongfang, born in Hunan, China. From the late 20th century, Spain had gradually become one of the most open countries in Europe regarding international adoption. In just a few decades, the country's society had shifted from a cautious attitude to widespread acceptance, even encouraging families with means to adopt children from distant countries. By 2004, Spain had risen to become the country with the second largest number of international adoptions in the world, after the United States. Among these, China was one of the most chosen countries, especially for girls under 2 years old, because of clear legal procedures and because of the compassion of many Spanish families toward the circumstances of children abandoned during the one-child policy period. Typically, international adoption cases like this mainly occurred in large cities like Madrid or Barcelona. Therefore, in the remote autonomous region of Galicia, a famous upper-class couple, Rosario Porto and Alfonso Bastera, adopting a Chinese baby girl, received much attention. That baby was Asunta, and she became the first Asian origin child adopted in this area. The story quickly became major news locally. After completing the adoption procedures, the Porto-Bastera couple accepted an interview with local media. In the program, they shared, "Adopting Asunta is the most important decision of our lives. The child will be loved as our own flesh and blood." Although living in a region with deep Catholic traditions, both chose not to force Asunta to follow any religion, but instead taught her to think independently and have her own opinions. This open education method enabled Asunta to develop exceptionally intellectually from a young age, earning her the nickname Child Genius. From a young age, Asunta attended a prestigious school. Thanks to her outstanding academic achievements, she was allowed to skip grades directly to middle school, though she was still very young. Not only excellent in class, Asunta was also a multi-talented girl. She studied French, Chinese, played piano, violin, and attended ballet classes. Her schedule was so packed that weekends had almost no rest time, but Asunta always wore a smile, seeming to truly love everything she did. In her grandparents' eyes, Asunta was the family's pride and greatest joy. Her grandfather often picked her up after school and chatted with the girl. Her grandmother taught Asunta to swim. Everyone believed that Asunta was growing up in a happy and loving family. However, that beautiful life lasted only 10 years. 2 years before the incident, Asunta's grandparents died in succession, leaving Porto their entire substantial estate worth millions of euros. This event marked an unpredictable turning point in Rosario Porto's psychology. At age 43, instead of seeking comfort in family, she entered a late-blooming rebellious phase, resigning from her position as French honorary consul, calling it unpaid hard labor, then closing her father's law office to become a freelance legal consultant. It was during those turbulent days that Porto met another man. After becoming a freelance legal consultant, Rosario Porto frequently communicated with a strange man via work email. Initially, everything just appeared to be normal professional exchanges, but gradually, the content began to exceed the boundaries of work. She and this man exchanged emails almost daily, with lines full of innuendo. 8 months before the incident, Alfonso Bastera, Porto's husband, feeling suspicious, secretly logged into his wife's personal email account, discovering messages between his wife and her lover. This made him extremely angry. When confronted, Porto didn't deny it at all. She said coldly that their love had died long ago, that she was tired of the role of perfect wife that society imposed. The bitterness quickly pushed their marriage of over 10 years to the brink of collapse. After that, the two divorced. After the separation, Asunta lived with her mother in the luxurious apartment her grandparents had left in downtown Santiago. Bastera returned to his hometown of Bilbao, trying to start over, but single life quickly revealed emptiness and deadlock. He was a journalist, but with unstable income, accustomed to living off his ex-wife's finances. Not long after, seeking financial help from a wealthy relative, he returned to Galicia, renting a small old apartment just 82 feet from where Porto and her daughter lived. Though divorced, he still couldn't let go of that relationship. Day after day, Bastera sent numerous emails to his ex-wife, listing in detail every household chore to describe his necessity in the family. 3 months before the incident, Rosario Porto suddenly had to be hospitalized due to her condition worsening. Bastera immediately went to the hospital to care for her, not just out of responsibility, but also out of the fragile hope that old feelings could be mended. Perhaps Bastera's quiet attention softened Porto's heart, her words becoming less cold. Taking this opportunity, Bastera expressed his desire to continue caring for her and Asunta, with only one condition. Porto must completely end her relationship with her lover. Porto agreed. From then on, the three often appeared together, dining out, strolling, or taking Asunta to ballet class. Those moments made Bastera think his family had become happy again. 1 month after the incident, independent analysis results from the forensic laboratory showed that in Asunta's hair sample, at a section about 1.2 inches from the root, experts discovered traces of the sedative lorazepam. With an average hair growth rate of 0.4 inches per month, this meant Asunta had been given the medication continuously for at least 3 months before her death. This discovery changed the entire direction of the investigation. The case was no longer an impulsive act in a fit of anger or desperation, but a meticulously prepared, silent, and cold-blooded crime. Someone, over many consecutive weeks, had consistently poisoned the girl bit by bit, turning seemingly harmless pills into a slow murder weapon. Asunta's music teacher also confirmed that abnormal signs had appeared early. About 2 months before the incident, Asunta had dozed off right in the middle of piano class, something that had never happened before. Initially, the teacher just thought the girl was studying too much and lacked sleep. However, 2 weeks later, Asunta again slumped over the desk mid-lesson, unable to complete the piece. Worried, the teacher decided to keep her after class to talk. When asked, "Did you eat breakfast?" Asunta hesitated and answered that she didn't remember. That was the moment that alarmed the teacher. An intelligent child with good memory couldn't remember whether she had eaten breakfast or not. That wasn't normal at all. Later, in that brief conversation, Asunta casually mentioned that her mother had given her some white powder to drink before coming to class. Hearing this, the teacher just nodded slightly. She remembered that Asunta's parents had mentioned their daughter had seasonal allergies, so she assumed it was just medication to reduce symptoms. That afternoon, after school ended, Bastera, Asunta's father, came to pick her up. The teacher then saw the girl walking unsteadily, having to lean against the wall with each step, so she worriedly told him that Asunta seemed unwell, possibly due to the medication causing drowsiness. However, Bastera just smiled lightly, casually responding, "It's nothing, just regular cold medicine." In reality, Asunta's drowsiness, fatigue, and unsteady gait weren't random. These were typical adverse reactions when the body is affected by lorazepam, a powerful sedative commonly used in treating anxiety disorders. To find the source of this medication, police began tracing the couple's medication purchases in the 3 months before the incident. Investigation revealed that on July 5th, Bastera, Asunta's father, had purchased 50 lorazepam tablets at a local pharmacy. Less than 2 weeks later, he returned, saying the previously purchased medication was lost, then bought another 25 tablets. As for Porto, at the end of July, when she went to the hospital for a follow-up, she lied, saying she hadn't used medication all month, so the doctor continued to prescribe a new order. When compiled, police discovered that in July alone, these two possessed up to 125 lorazepam tablets. More frighteningly, each time they bought medication, about a week later, Asunta would show uncomfortable reactions. At the end of July, 12-year-old Asunta entered summer vacation and didn't need to go to school anymore. She went to the beach with her mother, swam in the sea, attended local festivals, relaxing well for 3 weeks. After that, she went to visit her housekeeper's hometown, spending 2 happy weeks there. The summer of 2013 was Asunta's happiest summer, but also her last. During this time, because Asunta wasn't nearby, her parents couldn't continue giving her medication. 5 days before the incident, knowing Asunta was about to return home, Bastera went to buy 50 more tablets. From this, police traced the entire process of the two giving Asunta medication. Although police had collected a series of incriminating evidence, after being arrested, the Porto couple still firmly denied all charges. Both were detained in the same detention center, separated only by a thin wall. Thinking that silence could help them stay calm, police had secretly placed listening devices to monitor every exchange. More than a month after the incident shocked Spain, a newspaper suddenly published a recording of the conversation between the two in the detention facility. In the recording, Porto's voice rang out, cold and full of innuendo. "This is you and your little trick. Have you handled that thing yet?" On the other side of the wall, Bastera replied in a low, urgent voice, "Be quiet. They might be listening to us." Just a few short sentences, but when the conversation was published by the media and dramatized on television programs, a storm of public opinion immediately erupted. The public was almost certain that the two were the perpetrators and that the Asunta case left nothing to doubt. They became symbols of cold-blooded crime hidden behind an intellectual and prestigious appearance. On September 21st, 2014, exactly 1 year after Asunta's death, Porto published a short obituary in the newspaper with just one line, "Mother will always love you." A sentence that seemed tender, but in that context made all of society shudder with doubt. After that, the process of collecting and verifying evidence, along with jury screening, took longer than expected, causing the trial date to be continuously postponed. In September 2015, 2 years after the tragedy that shook all of Spain, the trial for the Asunta case officially opened. The courtroom at A Coruña Provincial Court was packed with reporters, all hoping justice would be served. The prosecution stepped forward, presenting a series of evidence carefully collected over many months. Each image, each line of surveillance data was projected on a large screen. A complete picture of the fateful day of September 21st, 2013, gradually became clear. According to security camera footage, at 2 p.m. that day, Asunta left her mother's house to go to her father's apartment. All three, Porto, Bastera, and Asunta, had lunch together. The prosecution asserted, right during that meal, the couple had mixed lorazepam into their daughter's food or drink. Forensic examination results showed that the amount of medication in Asunta's blood far exceeded the permitted level, and traces of the same medication were also found in the girl's urine, a detail that matched perfectly with the excretion time of 2 to 4 hours after ingestion. After lunch, all three played cards together. 2 hours later, Asunta and her mother left the house. At 6:12 p.m., the garage camera recorded Porto driving out. About an hour later, one of Asunta's friends happened to see Bastera walking with Asunta on the street. At 6:35 p.m., the alarm system at the country villa in Teo was deactivated, an important fact showing that Porto and Asunta had arrived. And at 8:53 p.m., the alarm was reactivated, coinciding with when the neighbor saw Porto drive away from the villa, alone. Based on all the facts, the prosecution reconstructed the entire crime scenario. After giving Asunta medication, Porto drove her daughter to the villa, with Bastera hiding in the trunk to avoid being recorded by cameras. There, the two restrained and caused the girl to die, then turned off the alarm system to avoid detection. Finally, they took Asunta's body to a slope 2.5 miles from the villa, placing it under dense trees to fake the scene. Because the body lay in darkness, passers-by didn't notice anything unusual. That evening, from 9:44 to 10:06, surveillance cameras around the building continuously recorded Bastera passing by up to 9 times. The prosecution argued that this action wasn't genuine worry, but a deliberately staged drama aimed at creating false alibi evidence, proving he was searching for his daughter when the girl was no longer alive. However, at A Coruña Provincial Court, defense lawyers counterattacked strongly. They pointed out that there was no direct evidence proving Porto and Bastera actually killed Asunta. Everything was just inferences from indirect facts, and many of them still contained contradictions that couldn't be clearly explained. A typical example was the testimony of Asunta's friend, who claimed to have seen her with Bastera at 6:22 p.m. at a shopping center. However, security camera footage showed that just 1 minute before that, at 6:21, Asunta was still sitting in her mother Porto's car. This small discrepancy caused the entire courtroom to stir. The prosecution quickly countered, arguing that the time displayed on the payment receipt could differ by a few minutes from reality. Nevertheless, doubts about the accuracy of the timeline persisted throughout the trial. After a month of tense litigation, the jury finally reached absolute consensus. The court declared Rosario Porto and Alfonso Bastera guilty of premeditated murder. Both were sentenced to 18 years in prison and permanently stripped of guardianship rights. Ironically, in 2015, Spain's criminal law had just been amended, adding life imprisonment for the murder of minors. However, according to the principle of non-retroactivity in law, that clause couldn't be applied to the Asunta case, a tragedy that occurred just 2 years before the new law took effect. After the verdict was announced, both defendants rejected the outcome and quickly filed appeals. 5 months later, the High Court of the Autonomous Region of Galicia reviewed the entire case file and concluded that, based on existing evidence, it couldn't be determined that Bastera was present at the country villa at the time of Asunta's death or directly participated in the act of killing the girl. However, the court believed he had contributed to planning and supporting the execution of the crime, therefore maintaining the original charge and 18-year sentence as before. 3 years after the incident, Spain's Supreme Court once again reviewed and decided to uphold all rulings of the High Court, officially closing the legal proceedings. Nevertheless, both Porto and Bastera firmly maintained their innocence. During detention, Porto regularly sent handwritten letters to newspapers and television stations, recounting details of the case and asserting she was wrongly accused. Although legal procedures had closed, public opinion never stopped discussing. Many still questioned the real motive that led this intellectual couple to harm their adopted daughter. One of the most common hypotheses was financial motive. According to circulating information, Asunta's grandfather had left her a considerable fortune. Meanwhile, Porto fell into debt, while her lover was suspected of being involved in illegal immigrant smuggling rings, which may have caused her to fall into financial crisis. As for Bastera, after divorce, with precarious income, he lived almost entirely dependent on his ex-wife. If Asunta died, the two, as legal adoptive parents, would become the legal heirs of all the girl's assets. This hypothesis also explains why Asunta's body was placed right by the roadside, as if they deliberately wanted others to discover it early, to speed up the legal settlement process and inheritance. 4 years before the incident, Porto had received treatment at a private clinic. At that time, she showed clear signs of anxiety and sadness. A doctor in her medical records wrote that she was very annoyed with her daughter, considering her daughter a trouble. This shows Porto may have had thoughts of abandoning her adopted daughter very early on. Based on collected details, some people put forward a hypothesis that Porto and Bastera's police report about the nighttime break-in in Asunta's room was actually a staged drama by them. Perhaps from that time, they were already plotting to harm the girl, while the story about the stranger was just a pretext to mislead public opinion. This also partly explains why after that break-in, they didn't report to police. A neighbor living in the same building even confirmed that his dog didn't bark at all that night, which would be almost impossible if there was a real intruder. To this day, the Asunta case remains a topic of endless discussion among the Spanish public. People still wonder what could have driven an upper-class couple, once seen as an ideal model of intellectuals, to harm the very child they had once rescued and loved. In prison, Rosario Porto's condition gradually worsened. 7 years after the incident, she chose to end her own life, leaving all her assets to a close friend who regularly visited, leaving nothing to her ex-husband. Meanwhile, Alfonso Bastera has always insisted on his innocence, never showing signs of remorse or regret, which makes him ineligible for pardon or release under any special circumstances. The case was later adapted into many literary and cinematic works. Among them, the 2017 documentary The Hidden Truth, The Asunta Case, released an actual recording of Porto and Bastera when they were detained in the holding facility. This recording seemed to imply that on the day of the incident, Bastera didn't meet Porto to commit the crime together. Therefore, whether Bastera participated in the crime or not remains controversial. After the Asunta case, the Galician government conducted a review and tightened all child adoption procedures. The procedures for checking, screening backgrounds, and psychological evaluations of adoptive parents became much stricter and more complex than before. Not only in Spain, but China also quickly adjusted its policies, strengthening supervision of international adoption files to ensure absolute safety for children sent abroad. Asunta's tragedy became a profound warning about the gap between perfect appearances and the darkness hidden within a family. May from now on, no child has to suffer a similar fate, that every child, whether born or adopted, can grow up in the arms of love, understanding, and genuine goodwill from those who are parents. And that is today's heartbreaking case. Do you believe that behind perfect appearances, sometimes such terrible dark corners are hidden? Was Asunta just a victim of a cold-blooded plan, or the tragic result of a broken family? Please leave your thoughts and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss other shocking crime stories we'll bring you. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.